Hello and welcome to another episode of the People Powered Podcast. We are continuing our series, folks, where we are showcasing companies that are doing culture well, that are doing some great stuff, and we're helping them showcase some of that secret sauce, if you will, so that others can benefit and others can learn and grow their very own internal workplace experiences. So today we welcome Harry Reynolds. Harry works for Kinetic Systems Incorporated, and I'll let him tell you a bit more about the company. But as the director of operations there, he has helped this organization and worked with his leadership team to help navigate a number of changes that they've went through, and in light of where the pandemic has had us end up, and just in general with the economy being what it is, I think that a lot of organizations are contending and having to navigate with some of the challenges that any changes, mergers, acquisitions might entail. Welcome, Harry.
Thank you, Laurie. I'm very excited to be here with you and spend a little bit of time talking about leadership practices, right?
Yeah, that's the plan.
That's the plan, right?
Absolutely. Before we deep dive into leadership and change and provide tips for our listeners in terms of how to, as a leader, help your team work through change, let's first give the audience a bit of insight into how Harry got to doing what Harry does today.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I'll be happy to do that. So as Laurie said, my name is Harry Reynolds. I'm originally from Costa Rica. That's where I was born and raised and did my undergrad studies. Worked for a couple of years there. And then I started working for the company that I currently work, Kinetic Systems, which is basically a process mechanical contractor. However, we have three divisions. We have not only a construction division, we also have a equipment division, and we also have a facility management division. I've been working for the company for almost 25 years by now, and I work of different parts of the globe and wearing different hats. I probably started, I think it was in 99. That was my first year there, and I was in Costa Rica for a couple of years. At that time, Intel, the chip manufacturer, was doing an expansion of their factory in Costa Rica that they had just recently opened, and I had just maybe graduated from college for a couple of years. So I had the opportunity to start working for them for about 2 years. And because the type of clients that we serve, they have a global footprint. These are companies that work in the semiconductor industry, companies like Intel, Samsung, Texas Instrument, or biopharmaceutical companies like Pfizer, like Moderna, right? They have global operations, and therefore Kinetics follows them wherever basically they are doing new projects, doing new factories. And about maybe 2 years into the job, I had the opportunity to travel to China for about 3 years to do a project there in Shanghai, that it was also another Intel factory. So I had the opportunity to interface with a new culture. And I think I would say that was one of the most important moments in my career, where allowed me to be a better manager, a better leader, because I had to try to put myself in the mentality of others, try to understand a new culture, because they do things differently, right? Some people may say, oh, they're doing this wrong because they don't do it this way or they don't do it that way. But at the end of the day, I think that really opened my eyes to how to do things differently and how important it is to try to understand the people that are working with you, right? It was a great learning experience for me, trying to work and understand this new culture. I remember it was not until probably my second year that I started taking some Mandarin lessons. Okay. And luckily enough, on that course that I was taking, they were also teaching a little bit about the Chinese culture. And then I started to understand certain aspects, or why they would do things a certain way, or why they wouldn't do things in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And that allowed me to understand when I was requesting something for my engineers to get done, and maybe if it wasn't done, there was a reason behind. So I had to understand that for me, it was going to be very important to try to understand the people that are working with me, so that I can try to, get better results, right?
Absolutely.
And
You're
about
coming in hot already. Even in this, you're coming in hot with some tips right there to kind of put yourself in that person's shoes and understand that whatever you're observing, there's more than one way to do things. And it doesn't mean that there's one way that's better than another. So instead of trying to dictate as a leader and tell them you need to do it this way because I said so, instead come at it from that angle of curiosity and ask them to help you understand why they're approaching it the way they're doing it, right? So right there, already a tip. Sorry, I'm gonna let you continue.
Exactly.
Back into
Exactly. And then I remember it was probably about 2004, and I had the opportunity to work with a lot of expats from different parts of the world while I was in China, people from Europe, from North America, from Latin America, from Asia. And I noticed there was a lot of competition, worldwide, and I wanted to keep growing within the company, right? I think I really need to try to get maybe some postgraduate studies. And I started researching universities, and I ended up applying to a few universities. I got a scholarship on a couple of them. And when I presented the resignation letter to the company, the chief operating officer of the company, which knew me personally, even though he was very high up, he used to travel to, and I think he's a good example of a good leader. He used to travel to all the different branches across the world, and he knew everybody personally.
Well, and another tip right there to take the time as a leader. One of the things that made him a great leader is that he was personable and took the time to get to know. Despite having, employees across the globe, when he did visit, he would get to know them on a personal level to be able to remember them and maybe not remember their name, but still have some notion and show them that I see you, make that person feel seen and valued. Sorry.
Yeah, and I have a good story that I could tell along those lines. I remember I presented my resignation letter. I think the year was 2004 because, I told the people in the company I was going to pursue a master's degree in construction management at the time, and I was going to go to a university in Texas where they were giving me a scholarship. And I remember the week after, the CEO of the company, his name is Bob Ragara. He doesn't work for the company any longer, but he's now the chief executive officer for a company called Jacobs Engineering, which is a very large engineering and construction firm. He flew to China because he had some meetings, and he called me, "Hey, I want to have dinner with you, Harry." So I went and have dinner. Said, "Hey, I noticed you presented your resignation letter, and I know that you're going for try to pursue your postgraduate degrees. Is there anything we can do to make you stay?" And I told him, "Well, for me, it's very important to try to advance in my career." So he said, "Hey, I have a proposal for you. What if Kinetics was to pay for your postgraduate studies and you continue working for us? And then we find an office in the US where they have a good construction management program. And then you work during the day with us and you study at night." So that sounded really interesting. I started doing some research. I ended up finding that Arizona State University had a very good construction management program, and Kinetics had a big operation in Arizona. So I ended up applying to that university. I got accepted, and I got relocated. I think it was at the end of 2006. And I started my master's programs in 2007. And the company that I work, Kinetics, they pay for my master's program. So I was pretty much working during the day.
They would invest in your development, they invested in your training, knowing that it would also plant that seed of loyalty, which was kind of already there, but it just helped nurture that seed of loyalty to the company and nurture, kind of your investment in. By them investing in you, you were that much more invested in them and that company.
That is exactly right.
Absolutely. Okay. So you fast forward all the way to you've been working with them now 25 years.
That's correct.
Okay. So let's talk a bit more about what has kept you there for 25 years. What are some of the elements of that workplace culture that have made you stick around for 25 years?
Yeah, I would say I've been very lucky of having to work for leaders that have understood me well. And in my case, for example, it's very important for me to have like a good professional challenge in front of me, so that I to keep me motivated from doing different things. Because if I start doing something for a long time, maybe after 2 years of doing the same thing, I'm gonna get bored and I want to try to do something different. And I had the opportunity for work for people where I had expressed hey, for me, it's important, I would like to do something different. I've been doing this for a while. If there's an opportunity to do X, Y, or Z, right? And sooner or later, they let me know, hey, by the way, there's an opportunity to do this. Are you interested in doing that? So I wore many different hats in the company. And I think that has kept me motivated from continuing doing different things, right? And more recently, I would say the last maybe 8 years or so, I had the opportunity to develop a lot of new processes for control within the company, to try to standardize, to try to become more consistent, right? And they gave me basically free reins, in the sense of they allow me to use my creativity to develop the processes, the systems, to implement them, and to develop training on the personal level, right? So having that freedom is what really made me stick here.
Okay, so folks, I don't think, Harry, you've not read my book, right?
Not yet.
Good. This just validates what we're saying in the book, that of those needs that once fulfilled will nurture and allow that loyalty to blossom, that high performance. What are some of those needs? We talked about growth, the opportunities for growth, training and development. They invested in his training. And the third one that he just touched on is autonomy and empowerment. He was given free rein to innovate. He was encouraged to bring his ideas to the table, but then also allowed to bring them to fruition and develop the plan required to bring them to fruition. So it's not rocket science. I've been saying this, and I literally wrote a book on it, that once you are able to meet those 10 basic needs, you will effectively create that workplace culture where people want to stick around. So thank you for providing that added insight. And when we initially started talking, before we started recording, you talked to us about the founder of the company, and you talked to us about how his leadership style was one that you aspired to emulate later in life as you were navigating kind of your own leadership experience. Can you tell us a bit more what attributes that leader had that made you want to emulate him?
Yeah, definitely. The founder of the company, his name is Bill Bianco. He already passed away, but when he founded the company back in 73, right, that's when a lot of the semiconductor industry was starting in the Bay Area. And basically, because of the new processes that these companies were getting developed, they didn't have basically a process piping contractor with the ability to serve them. So he saw the opportunity there of trying to serve a customer need. And therefore, he tried to develop a company that basically would provide those special services to these companies. But I think the most important thing, in my opinion, from his leadership style, it was that even though he was the owner and founder of the company, he always stayed very close to the people. He always made sure that he knew everybody personally. He understood what was important to them, and he took care of their needs whenever they needed something, right? And therefore, he created a lot of loyalty within the people that were following him throughout the years, right? And I think that those, in my opinion, are why a lot of people basically stay in the company for a long time, because for a long time, those core values stayed, especially on the first maybe 30 years of the company. And you had a lot of people that were very loyal to the company because of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the needs that we talk about in the book is also leadership. We've all heard that really cliched at this point, saying that people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad bosses.
Exactly.
On the flip side of that, people will stay and tolerate a lot more change and challenges when they have good leadership. They will stay for a good boss.
Mm-hmm.
So, on that note, I just kind of alluded to change and evolution and just having to manage as a leader change within your teams, because the one constant in today's world is change. And I recognize the irony of that statement, but can you help our listeners understand a bit more context in terms of what kind of changes have transpired for Kinetic Systems over the past few years?
Yeah, definitely. So, as companies start growing, new opportunities arise. And therefore, with these new opportunities, there's also the need for having maybe additional capital to expand in a new market, or additional capital or additional resources to try to do a new type of business. And then the leaders of the company, the CEOs, COOs, they start looking for ways of, hey, how can we fund this initiative? So what happened is the first transition that I remember, at least during my era, right, it was probably in the early 2000s, where basically the company was expanding a lot, and therefore what they started doing was acquiring other companies in different geographical areas to try to expand and be able to cover and be able to provide the services that our clients needed, right? I remember our company initially bought another contractor in Germany, which they also had operations in Asia. Then they bought, I think it was one company in the Northwest of the United States. They bought another company in the Southwest of the United States. And they started basically trying to integrate with the company. So one of the challenges that I remember from that era, it was that all the companies were doing things differently because they have different processes, different methods. So around the year, I remember 2004, they realized that with this merger, they started growing like very fast, and they had a few projects that were problematic. So they created a committee to try to research what happened, and they realized it was that we were not following certain processes that were critical to the business. So an operations convergence took place. This committee basically decided to develop new processes that would be implemented across the company, and they did training across the whole world, right? They went through Costa Rica, Mexico, China, all the branches in the US, Asia, right?
So to give our listeners a bit of an idea, when you initially started working for Kinetic Systems, how many employees roughly were there?
I would say at that time, maybe 1,500, probably.
1,500.
Right?
How many employees post-merger acquisition? How many employees are you now?
Maybe about 2,500.
Okay, so 2,500. So you've doubled, more or less.
Exactly.
Right? And I'm hearing that as you were acquiring new companies, these companies are coming in and they've got their own personality. They've got their own culture within their... So the failure in that digging deep is that they didn't recognize that they needed to kind of create and craft a new culture that would allow people to keep elements of each of their personalities, all the while having this shared kind of family feel. Is that kind of...
That is exactly right. That's exactly right.
So what are some of the challenges that you noticed that the team members, the employees themselves, were experiencing, and what do you think was the most challenging for them in navigating these changes and this every acquisition having new colleagues and whatnot?
Yeah, I think whenever a merger or an acquisition takes place, I think one of the most critical aspects is the company getting acquired is always going to worry, right? The people in the company say, oh, what is going to happen with us? Are they going to lay us off, or are they going to reduce personnel, right? Or are they not going to allow us to do what we were doing? So I think the important thing on the mergers is to first, for the leader of the company that is making the acquisition, is to make sure that they try to fully understand how the other company operates, try to understand their people. And that requires time for this leader or these leaders to try to go to this new company they acquire and see how they're doing things, try to understand the people, what's important to them, what's not important, right? And when they're ready to make a change, to take them into account. So, for example, from this first merger that I told you about, I do remember that the committee that was elected to develop these new processes and this training had people from all the different companies that had been acquired, right? Perfect. So basically, you had a lot of different ideas coming. They got together, they developed these new procedures, and then training was implemented. It's not only simply develop the procedures, hey, you're going to do them, right? It's about going and spend the time with the people, getting to know them personally, doing the training, right?
But then by having representation from each of the different companies at the table, and I would also encourage to have representation from different levels within each company, so that you've got the voice and you're being able to create a true picture of what needs to be fixed, what are some of the gaps that are at play as you're trying to assess. And if you're putting together a committee to try and support implementation, integration, and having a more seamless transition, then you need to be intentional about who is going to sit on that committee to ensure that it's going to have representation from all stakeholders impacted from some of the solutions and initiatives that will come to head from that work together, right? So again, another great tip there, when you are helping your team kind of adapt to the change, to have a task force, a focus group, some committee put together that are going to take the time to get to know each of the little companies, or the different little, whatever size they are, every company, to understand and draft, I guess, a bit of a blueprint of what they are and how they're coming in, so that whatever initiatives they or strategy they come up with as far as an integration plan reflects and keeps and retains some pieces of each of those little personalities, so that the team members being acquired are going to be able to resonate and see some level of normalcy and continuity happening with this acquisition, and that'll reassure them. And I also like that you touched on a lot of the emotions at play, which are certainly challenging for any acquisition or merger, is that there's emotions at play. There are people who are running under certain assumptions, and one of the easiest ways to manage that is to communicate. Be as transparent as you can. Communicate in all the ways you can and as often as you can, to reassure, but also to manage and to set realistic expectations.
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay. So as a leader, do you have other tips, strategies, or tricks that leaders can use to help their teams kind of brave the ups and downs that any integration and the tumultuous times that any integration will inevitably entail?
Yeah, definitely. And I think before we go there, one of the things that I would like to maybe point out is the way I see leadership. For me, leader has nothing to do with title more than with the responsibility of helping those around you thrive, right? That's the way I see leadership. So really anybody in whatever position, if someone is going through a merger or through an acquisition and start getting worried, right? The first thing that I would tell, if you're frustrated about maybe some of your leaders not doing certain aspects, right? The best thing you can do, instead of just getting worried about things you cannot control, trying to worry about the things that you can control. Just like the Stoics used to say, right? What I can control is my thoughts, my decisions, and my elections, whatever options I have. Those are the only things that I control. Everything outside of me, I cannot control. So what you could do is, even if you're not in a rank that there's a lot of people underneath you, you always have someone on your left and someone on your right. So try to be the leader you would like to have, and try to help someone on your left and someone on your right thrive, do a better job. And that's leadership for me, right?
Okay.
So I would say
what you just said there. We're hearing leading without a title in everything you do in life.
Exactly.
And to be the leader that you would like to have, and that regardless of your role within an organization, you have the opportunity to lead by supporting your peers and by showing up for your colleagues in a way that you would want someone to show up for you. Sorry,
definitely.
I just summarize that like it was that is gold right there. So be the leader, don't wait for the title.
Exactly.
Don't wait, just be the leader on the daily with your peers, with whoever you interact with, by showing up to support and to help other people thrive. Like
that's correct. Exactly. Definitely. And you know what is going to happen, like on the long run, is when you start doing that with the people around you, it's almost like that good attitude that you're doing is going to get contagious, and it's going to try to spread out. People are going to see that. Your boss is going to see that. Other people are going to see that. Maybe one of the, if you work for a while helping some other people, maybe one of you goes to another team and they start doing the same thing. So all of a sudden, that effort starts basically replicating in other parts of the businesses, and hopefully you can start becoming what ignites culture change.
Yeah, that is absolutely what would ignite culture change.
And then going back to your other question, I would say, what are things leaders can do in these instances? I would say, please make sure that you take the responsibility of taking care of your people. That's, to me, the most important thing. Leadership, in my opinion, comes with the responsibility of helping others thrive. And how do you help others? Well, first you need to know what is important to them. So you gotta get to know your people, right? You have to understand what triggers them. For some people, it's going to be very important to have freedom at work. For some other people, it's going to be very important to have time off so they can spend with their family when they want to. For some other people, they want to be creativity is very important to them. Trying to understand what is important to the people is probably the step number one, in my opinion, because once you do that,
sorry to interject, to understand that, what does that look like? It looks like asking them. It looks like normalizing that this is not necessarily, this is challenging for you as a leader as well, and for everyone in the company, and we're all in this together, and asking them, what are you feeling, what do you need, like, and creating channels for them to continuously feed that information up to you so that you can adapt your approach and your strategy accordingly. Sorry, I keep interrupting you. I do that as a host.
No, it's okay. I think that's a good way of doing it, right? Whenever we identify something that makes sense, let's point that out, right? So that the listeners can make note of it. Like you said, yeah, it's spending time with your people. And if you're on a large organization, you're going to have to spend a lot of time traveling and getting to know your people. I think that's very important. And the other thing is, once you understand that, is how do you take the responsibility of helping them thrive? Well, you have to remove any constraints that are in their way. How do you facilitate their work? I think that's probably, to me, step number two. If for this person this is important, you may need to do some maybe realignment of resources, and you may need to make some changes. And maybe this person is doing something that doesn't satisfy them. Is there another position in my company that I could probably make some changes to make sure they thrive? Or can I partner this person with someone else that has a different characteristic and make a good team out of both of them? You're going to have to start making those changes to make sure that people can thrive.
Absolutely. And that last piece that you just mentioned, that mentorship piece. But mentorship, I see two values of, well, there's tons of value for mentorship programs, but yes, to match them with someone who maybe are that next level in what they're trying to grow into on a technical perspective, but sometimes also to do a matching where you identify that this person could benefit from being more of a certain way, match them with that person to be able to help and coach them and support them into stretching a bit, because we get comfortable in our comfort zone. It's a very comfortable place to be, but beautiful magic happens beyond that comfort zone. True growth comes and spawns from that moving beyond and stretching beyond that comfort zone. Think about going to the gym. I don't know about you, but the first time, if I go back to the gym and I haven't been in a while, suddenly I'm very aware the following day of how many stairs there are in my house. And I question myself as to why I keep buying these multiple story houses when I could just have a one floor one, right? So, but from that pain, that discomfort, the next day, I remember I have muscles in places I'd forgotten, right? So certainly doing that matching and helping them stretch beyond their comfort zone and kind of pushing them at a pace, though, that is okay with them, that is manageable for them, because you don't want to stress them out either. Sorry, keep going.
No, like you said, I think that following up on what you said, I think whenever we see an obstacle, and this is mainly from a personal aspect, whenever you see an obstacle, you figure, how do I go about this obstacle, right? And really, there's a book that is called The Obstacle is the Way. The only way to go through the obstacle is not from the left or to the right, it's just simply push through the obstacle. And at the beginning, you're not going to get the courage. Some people, they say, I have to wait until I'm ready, or I have to wait until I have the courage to do it. You're not going to get the courage to do it before you do it. Only after you've done it, that's when you develop
the courage come. Yeah, I agree.
Exactly.
I like that. Yeah. So removing obstacles when you can, and being aware. So first step, you talked about, one of the tips that you shared was to get to know them and to understand what they're contending with. What are some of the challenges? But then that next step being, how can I potentially help alleviate some of the challenges or some of the burdens or obstacles, remove them? And these may be systemic as well. There's some of the things we do because we've always done it that way. Does it necessarily mean that that's the right way to do it and it'll continue to be the right way? You need to revisit these things, but also to sometimes work with the team members to help them work through those challenges. Understand that we can't remove this. We need to keep going. The obstacle is the way. We need to keep going that way. So what do you need from me as a leader to support you and to help you manage in the moment that challenge?
Yeah, I think that mentorship aspect is very critical on all aspects of the business. I remember back in maybe 2019, 18, 19, we were going to a growth period and we started hiring a lot of new people. So we realized, well, we're going to have a lot of new people and they don't know how to do things. We need to establish a mentorship program. So what we did is we identified like key people within the company that could act as mentors, and we assigned them one or two individuals that they were going to try to follow up on a weekly basis to try to work as mentors to help them go through the challenges, to help them basically go through that, maybe like you said, discomfort zone when they have to do something new that they've never done before. Try to be there for them.
Yeah, and if you do have, I like that, if you've got that mentor who's kind of acting as your safety net, try it.
Exactly.
Just try it. If it doesn't work out, I'm here to tell you
That's correct.
what you could do differently and how you can maybe try different ways that have been successful for me in the past. So when they're, I like, even as part of I'm just, my brain firing at 1,000,000 miles an hour right now, is to have a mentorship or a buddy system of sorts to be able to support them working through those challenges. But I'm going to add one more. What if it's two companies and you're matching them so that they can start to share each other's culture and each other's personalities, so they can somehow find that common ground between the two? And that's where you can start to grow and showcase this shared culture that you're trying to create, post acquisition.
Definitely.
So buddy system of sorts where they can kind of share, like, this is how we've always done it, this is how we've always done it, and then let's explore what makes the most sense from both of those ways. How can we create this even more effective procedure or process by merging both of our approaches and the best elements of both of our approaches? It has been a great conversation. We did have a few other questions that we didn't even get to. But if people would like to continue this conversation with you, Harry, is there any way they can reach out to you and connect with you to continue the
conversation? Definitely. My current platform that I use is LinkedIn. That's where basically I try to do, I open up a newsletter recently in the area of leadership, and I try to publish every week. So whoever is interested to do that, they can just go to LinkedIn and look for me, and I'll be happy to hear the comments everybody has to say. I try to share a little nugget every week about a different aspect of leadership, and so that's where they can find me.
Awesome. Harry Reynolds on LinkedIn. He's just started a newsletter, which is exciting, where he shares his own leadership practices, best practices, lessons learned, tips, tricks. So make sure that you do go out there and connect with him and sign up for his newsletter. I really like this newsletter feature that LinkedIn has introduced. It provides even more, the sharing of even more insights with all things culture and leadership. Folks, if you like what you heard, make sure to subscribe and share and like, and help us amplify our mission of creating as many positive and productive workplaces as possible. One last thing here, if you wanted to leave our audience with one nugget of wisdom, some gem of advice, what would that be?
So I would say is the third aspect of the leadership. One is making sure that leaders take the responsibility of helping people thrive. Second is getting to know their people and empower them to do things. And by the third and final aspect, I would say is make sure that for you to develop trust with the people is they have to trust you. Make sure you have their back, right? So if something goes bad, you have to take the responsibility for the people that did it, right? You have to encourage them. Mistakes happen, and by making mistakes, that's how we get better and better and better. But you have to have their back. People need to be able that if something goes bad, you're going to have their back, and if something goes well, you're going to give them credit, right? So make sure that you develop trust.
Develop trust and be intentional at developing and nurturing that trust. Absolutely, that is gold. Thank you, Harry, for joining us. It was a great conversation. We could have kept talking for hours on end, but in the spirit of respecting our time and everyone's time listening, thank you. And hopefully they connect with you and you are able to get a few more subscribers to your newsletter.
Thank you so much, Larry. Pleasure.
Listeners, as I say every episode, you've heard a bunch of tips, tricks, and strategies. I want you to pick just one and determine what action you can take to start to implement it immediately, and go do that.